you need to throw in a Mad Max in there, please. Throw in Dumb and Dumber. Just throw in something that shows a variety of stuff that we can do. But the problem is we're kind of caught where if it's not politically correct, and even what I experienced in 1992, the level of political correctness back then was already really, really strong.
I was wondering how it is you started catching on to some of the challenges that have come into the industry. I've noticed them over 10 years. It started, you know, if my view of it was I was in a pitch room with a few scripts, some producers that they wanted to dig into them with some of the larger studios. I was excited about that. But I started noticing in a lot of these meetings, they wanted me to convert all of my characters in whatever script I'd written to from male to female. And that didn't shock me. Because you know, I know there were times, you know, then and now and whenever when, you know, sometimes they'll, you know, everything's about animals, you know, and you know, talking animals or whatever, and you get kind of tired of it for, you know, you enjoy it for a while, you get tired of it, and they move on. So I just thought, oh well, I've missed my window because you know, I was writing a lot of these sort of gritty male characters or what have you. And that's what I saw 10 years ago or 11 years ago. But then 5 years ago, it seemed to go from just that standard kind of, you know, we're going to go this way for a while before we go that way. It started becoming much more kind of politically grounded in, you know, people telling me, like I say, people in the business saying, you're not going to be working for the next 6 months, just giving you a heads up. And at first I thought it was that same trend shift, which I thought, well, great, everyone should have a turn. But then I started getting told that this was going to be more the way of things as a kind of mandate and not as a trend anymore. That, you know, if you know, you're a white straight guy, you're probably not going to get a lot of work in the middle range of performing. And my girlfriend, who's black, kind of at first she was saying to me, well, that's not a bad thing. And I said, well, no, I don't think so. But she said, but it could be bad for us if you're not getting jobs. I said, well, that's true too. So anyway, but I started noticing these kinds of things becoming very kind of centered around Black Lives Matter and political issues. And
Well, hold on.
Oh,
I got to
sorry.
deal with this.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying,
Tell me later.
there's the update.
Okay.
Old stuff.
Yeah.
My son.
Oh, great. Yeah, mine's playing video games right now.
Yeah, this is not a YouTube. Thanks. You can keep that.
I will keep that.
Good guy,
Nice.
but a horrible father.
Yes.
Oh,
Horrible.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry.
yeah, I guess where I was going with that was just that yeah, she was saying, well, that could be
Yeah, so we have a modern trend, and Canada was, I think, ahead of that curve because of telefilm, and we are very cognizant of sort of the diversity thing. We are also probably more sensitive to indigenous programming than they were in the United States, ahead of that curve. There's so I'm of a couple of minds on that. In that Canada has always struggled, and this is probably a discussion you've had with your girlfriend. Is she in show business?
No, she's not, which
Okay,
is probably
so
healthy for me.
probably healthy, yeah. So the chat, and I've dealt with this for decades. This is not a new conversation. This is something we've had for such a long time. How come we can't get breakout entertainment products out of Canada? Is it our proximity to the United States? Yes, of course. It's true that there's no such thing as a cheap TV show, and when the American networks can sell to the Canadian networks Dynasty or Rockford Files for $5,000 an episode, as opposed to, you know, us making a show for $200,000, $300,000 an episode, even $150,000 at the time, it's still more than $5,000.
Right.
So the Americans could just dump content, professional content with big name stars that we all loved. The stuff looked better, was written better. That's a difficult problem to solve. And we're sleeping with the elephant. We're right there. Again, Britain has been able to do it, but that's because they have a history of writing tons of plays. They've got a much bigger available acting pool. Also, famous actors, Alec Guinness or whatever. I mean, they've maybe their actors aren't as famous as American actors. Peter O'Toole, I mean, was a huge star. So here, tiny Canada, anyone who became famous went to the United States, whether it was Jim Carrey, Michael J. Fox, things like that. Nobody really stayed.
Right.
So, but this whole woke thing, Canada invented it. It's been like that for as long as I can remember. CBC, when I was there, half the executives were women. That's not a bad thing, but they realized that they had to diversify at the time. They weren't ethnically diversifying or race diversifying, but certainly they were making sure that women had a place at the table. And, Joan Donaldson and Trina McQueen were the people who started the Journal. These were unbelievably technically talented women who were in news and were completely qualified. These were not people who were unqualified they weren't DEI hires. They worked their way through the ranks. But the Canadian government and its system of funding projects always had an antipathy towards adventure and comedy. Even back then, comedy was crude to them and were monstrously afraid of offending anybody. We had Men with Brooms, that was by Paul Gross, who was a well-known actor, and I guess he got that pushed through because Leslie Nielsen was in it, he was in it, and that they kind of funded that. But I can't remember too many comedies. There's the one with Billy Connolly where he played a zombie in some small town Canada. I can't remember what it was called.
And I remember
Charming
Canadian
dog, something
Bacon.
about a dog.
Right, yeah, I remember the premise. I don't remember the title.
Yeah, great little film.
Yeah.
And I wish we'd done more things like that. Of course, there's the guys on the East Coast with the glasses and Trailer Park Boys.
Right.
But
yes.
that was a happy accident. They did that show for 8 cents a show. I mean, that was the only reason that got going. Bubbles and the gang. And they're hugely loved. I was at a conference in Calgary where 2 of them showed up, and I was like they're rock stars.
Oh yeah, I
Trailer
ran a
Park
film
Boys are.
festival out on the East Coast called, at the time, the Tidal Wave Film Festival. I think they would change the name to the Silver Wave Film Festival. We had them come in to one of the nightclubs. We screened one of their season premiere shows, and the place was packed.
Oh yeah.
And they had got people, signing their bellies with black.
But I think that was all independent money.
Yeah.
Then you've got Steve Smith from Red Green.
Mhm.
That was all pretty much, I think, independent money, maybe some telefilm or something like that. But again, that was hugely successful, massive in the United States on PBS, but never really got the credit that they deserved in Canada. You have SCTV, that was legendary. Oh,
Yeah, and one of the things that I think drives the quality of a lot of those notable things is it's the writing. I mean, the writers, nothing's getting in the way, at least I assume in a lot of these cases, of the writing that's being done by the creator. And that's what used to drive me nuts about the telefilm stuff back in those days. Even you'd have to check off how many maple leaves or beavers were
Yep.
showing up in
Yep.
and it really frustrated the writing process. So you just wouldn't want to use them, and you were always hoping you could get into the States with your work because it was the only way to get around.
Well, I mean, like, what film other than maybe Blackberry recently, like our frustration, I use this as an example. How come we've never made a Mad Max? And Australia has been able to, like, what is it? That gay tinged film with Trevor somebody or other, where the queen of the something. I can't remember what the name of it. You know, a bunch of guys who dressed in drag. Adventures Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Ah, okay.
That was a great, great, funny film.
Mhm.
Ahead of its time. How come we Terrence Stamp, not Trevor, Terrence Stamp. So we're very much afraid. Telefilm has always been afraid of the outrageous. I pitched a show called um a TV show called Rupert's Land, which was
Mhm.
about a kind of a Ponzi British son of a British, you know, magnate lord, and the father hated his son because he was not manly enough and sent him to manage a Hudson's Bay outpost in Churchill Falls. And he hates Canada, hates his dad, wants desperately to go back and kill his father, but he can't do it until he succeeds in Canada. He gets a country wife, which was common at the time, where the local First Nations chieftain would just hand over one of his daughters to, you know, the person who ran the post. That was just something they did. It's I researched it. It's not unusual. It's called a country wife. Country wife who is really super smart and starts to love him, actually. So he's got this wonderful native woman who, in the story, she's gorgeous because I want her to be gorgeous. This trend to try to maleify all women on shows and games drives me nuts. Like,
Right.
you know, why are you bothering to do that? You know, why hire Sebastian if I can't see his muscles? Oh no, there's a scene where he's coming out of the shower with just a towel on. Oh no, girls. There's nothing wrong with a female gaze, but apparently the male gaze is verboten. But that's another subject.
Right.
Although Catherine Hahn was naked in Agatha all along, which was interesting.
Oh,
The Disney show, so sort of naked.
yeah.
We saw her bum, and nice bum she had too.
Yes, very much. Yes.
And and I had a character named you know what, Francois or something. It was a Courrier de Bois, short guy, like 4'5", but built like a brick shit house. He was a Courrier de Bois. He's now gone mad, as Courrier de Bois went mad from traveling from Montreal to, you know, to Alberta,
Right.
carrying furs in this ridiculous business called the fur trade. And the
Yeah.
fur trade was centered in Montreal, and my wife is Métis, and so we know sort of how that whole thing worked. And the
It's a brutal
Métis
life.
brutal life, brutal life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's gone nuts.
Mhm.
But he's, you know, he's a French Canadian guy, and they talk like this, and he's very happy to be, you know, in the fur trade, and you know, that's what he's happy doing,
This is
and
the voice.
that's the voice I want to be. Francois,
Okay.
yes, I'm going to be, and so he's nuts, in kind of the same nuts as the coach was in Cheers, or you know, the taxi, you know, in Taxi, the TV show Taxi. You had Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd. Yeah.
Yeah, he was out of his mind, right? He's like drug addled. That's what Francois was.
Right.
And I was told in no uncertain terms that I could not have a stupid French Canadian.
Hmm.
And I said, why? Aren't there stupid French Canadians? Well, yeah. Well, he's comic relief. He's a sweetheart, but he's gone nuts and he's kind of crazy. No, you can't do that. But I've watched French Canadian shows and they have stupid English characters. Well, they're allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So
This is
this very surreal conversation in 1992,
okay.
way before all this woke stuff. No,
Yeah.
in English Canada, Telefilm will not let you have a crazy, dumb French Canadian in an English production.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
this
amazing.
is so that's what I'm saying, is that this existed forever.
Right.
And so and he was a sweet guy. And the thing is, he always turned out to be right compared to the lead character that needed this, gang of people around him as he was fighting off the big fat Scotsman of the Nor'westers trying to take over the trade. Like there's a vicious rivalry for the furs. And funny show. Just hilarious.
The reason I mentioned in our back and forth on email a little bit about shows like Aliens that I was giving an example of, I just introduced those to my girlfriend and to my kids. And one of my boys came in at one point in, I think it's Alien Resurrection, and the characters in that one are just a roughneck band of I guess guys for hire that have collected some people in cryo chambers that they're going to put aliens into, unbeknownst to the people sleeping in the cryo chambers. But they're all very rough and tough. And my son made a comment about, boy, these guys are all really like rough and like strong, or it's making a comment about that. And one of the things that I had been talking about while we were watching is what I liked about Ripley is that there's a real evolution of her character, because in the first Alien, she's kind of she's a scientist and she has to deal with the situation, and you kind of see that evolve in that story. She gets a little tougher in the next one, but she needs the Marines to kind of teach her how to use the guns, and she doesn't know how to use them and is a bit naive still, but she's developing. But by the time you get to this episode, she's like mixing it up with guys who are admittedly tough. She's not throwing them around necessarily. I mean, she is, but they're not little wimps. And there's a real reason for why she's tough and can kind of confront the forces around her and everything. And now you're not allowed to do that. You have to make it so that a woman is throwing around 300-pound men like the moment she steps in,
like they were matchsticks.
Yeah. And so it just was interesting to me, because this was almost foreign to my 18-year-old who was watching, going, oh, they made films like that in the 90s. It's almost like I haven't seen that before. I said, yeah, I mean, they were still strong female characters. No one's knocking that, or there were still there's still room for there to be development in characters that they don't want to allow anymore now, in the kind of ways you're talking about, or in the ways that I'm talking about with regard to this. And that seems to just destroy the capacity to show arc and story and go into different venues of story that we used to seem to be able to go into. And certainly in the States, they used to be doing that up until more recently, more than Canada was. And I guess maybe it's evening out now, and they're both just trying to toe a very...
Well, I think in the United States, they're finding that, the differences in Canada doesn't make whether anything makes money.
Right.
And you watch the Canadian Film Awards, forgot what they're called, the Genies.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's seen any of the films.
Yeah.
And that's the other real problem in Canada, is that, which is the chicken and the egg? Do we not make films that people want to watch, or people just don't want to watch Canadian films? I don't know. We just don't have an industry up here, film industry. Very difficult. Not that good films aren't being made, but a lot of the films are really turgid and sad, and unwed women and violence against First Nations. And it was these are all valid stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But, you need to throw in a Mad Max in there, please. Throw in Dumb and Dumber. Just throw in something that shows a variety of stuff that we can do. But the problem is we're kind of caught where, if it's not politically correct, and even what I experienced in 1992, the level of political correctness back then was already really, really strong.
Yeah.
So unless we can break that mold in Canada, but that will never happen when bureaucrats are adjudicating what is entertainment and what isn't.
Do you think that that's starting to happen in a way, in an unintended way, maybe now? Because like we were saying earlier, the US is now caught up in the same thing that Canada has been for
but
ages.
they're breaking out of it now. But the wonderful thing about the United States, and what we knew that was going to work, was at some point they had to make money.
Right.
This experiment is now over.